Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. On the phone with me today, I have Amanda Nachman in San Diego, California. Amanda is the host of Find Your Passion Career podcast and CEO of College Magazine, a publication with over 900,000 monthly readers. Amanda, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, you focus a lot on both, finding your passion in your career and then also kind of helping people to find happiness in their career. And, I think there are many people who don't necessarily look to their career to find passion or happiness. Why do you think that people are really starting to seek out passion in their careers?
That's a great question. I don't necessarily feel that the career should bring you, like we should be going into it looking for happiness from the career. But what I do hope is that we are taking the time to pause from going through the motions in our hectic lives and identify what it is that we enjoy doing. And another word for that is what we're passionate about. What makes you light up inside when you talk about that topic? What's something you could do for hours on end? Where do your strengths lie? What do you value? Where are your principles? And then connecting some of those to your potential career. And when you are able to do that, the career that you end up in and that direction that you're going is going to be more intentional. And you're going to find that you're going to have a more fulfilling career. And there's a ripple effect to doing something that's fulfilling. And I'm sure you know this because you love what you do and I love what I do. When you really enjoy what you do, you're eager to get started on your work. You get in a flow. And I think that you make a larger impact. And just imagine if all of us were doing something that we were passionate about, the ripple effect of that.
No, you're totally right. And, I'm curious, like you work, I know with your magazine with college age people, but I'm sure you talk to people of all different ages that are looking for a job. I'm curious when you are talking to folks that are really focused on finding their passion, finding that thing that really gets them up in the morning, do you see that it's one age group more than another, or is it kind of all across the board?
I've noticed this question across every age. And I've talked to people, in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, even in their 50s. People are aware that they were meant to do something meaningful. And when you're able to find that meaning in your work, that just takes it to another level. And it's I don't know how to, I keep repeating fulfilling, but it's just so fulfilling to get to do work like that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't always start off at that level. But if you're moving in that direction, if you're taking steps toward that, instead of just getting a job for job's sake, although sometimes you do need to get a job for job's sake. There are bills to pay, there is student debt to pay off. But if you can find certain ways to connect, even just one of your strengths or one of your interests to what you're doing, there's a lot of opportunity for you to then build upon that and get even closer to what it is that you'll really enjoy.
Absolutely. Gosh, it's interesting. You mentioned college debt. We sure do all have some college debt to pay for. I would say very often, like you said, it doesn't always start out as a pursuit of passion. Like maybe we are just looking for a job. And then at some point we realize that finding passion is more important to us than we would have expected. I'm curious, when you talk to people who come to you and they are trying to find passion or they're trying to find happiness, whatever it is, do you find any common themes? Like, are people going through something in particular in their lives? Or, what do you notice that's similar about these people?
Yeah, when someone comes to me, it's usually because they're feeling stuck. It's usually because they felt the pressure to take a certain position or feel a pressure to go in a certain direction, maybe from society or from parents or your network. And they feel stuck and they're not feeling that they're doing what they were meant to be doing. They're kind of like, this is it, when they're in that position. And oftentimes I ask them a question. I say, how many people have you reached out to in a career path that you think is interesting? How many people have you reached out to? Have you gone onto your LinkedIn and looked up people in your network that are doing that are in positions that you think are intriguing, or are working for organizations that you think are cool? I mean, that can be it. Just the cool factor. You're like, that sounds cool. Have you talked to those people? And most of the time the answer is no. And that's okay. It's because it's not our instinct to turn to each other for how to go about this career journey. Our instinct is to go to job postings and to go to the internet and to just search for what is available, which I feel is a very much of a scarcity mindset versus an opportunity mindset, where there's so much opportunity that's really just not being positioned in a job post right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's, I believe it's like 75% of positions are not even posted. So why aren't we spending 75% of our time networking?
Sure. Well, so when you ask people and they say, I've never thought about that, I've never done that before, what do they usually say is sort of the reason that they've never reached out to someone before?
They didn't think of it. It's as simple as that. I had one student tell me, she's like, I feel, and not a student, she was a graduate. She's like, I feel silly that I haven't done that. And I said, don't beat yourself up about this. I've been thinking about this for 12 years. I've been, coaching this for years on this topic and seeing this myself unfold, and learning it the hard way. I think that we just don't realize that other people are out there that they want to help you. So when you reach out to someone and you tell them, I think what you're doing is so cool. I want to know how you got to where you are. What did your career journey look like? They're going to be flattered. And people love to talk about themselves. So they're going to be like, yeah, I'll give you 15 minutes of my time, or maybe even a half an hour. And when you're making those connections and then they get to hear your passion for that same subject, they're like, oh, they're going to see a little bit of them in you, and they're going to want to help you and connect you to other people. And what this graduate told me was, she's like, I felt less alone and more inspired by this process. She reached out to one person a day. That was her goal, just to connect with one person a day in a career that she thought was interesting. And her passion was for writing, creativity, and to do work that she felt would make an impact. And she talked to people that worked for writers' residence. She worked for people that were doing content for influencers. She talked to people that were doing they're writing content at top 1% publications, but sharing their journey of how they got there. And everyone was willing to connect her with someone else. I think that was most surprising to her.
Well, it's interesting because when I talk to folks, and I suggest the same thing, I think it's a really great thing to do. I often get feedback, that the person's like, oh, I don't want to bug them. I've never heard of this before. It seems scary. And I think you just touched on something in that not only were people willing to meet with this woman that you mentioned, they were willing to refer other people to meet with her as well.
Yeah, I think we are, we're nervous to make these connections. I think because we often hide behind this technology. Before we had all this technology, we had to make these connections. We had to lean on our networks much more. So this is a really great way to differentiate yourself, first off, by reaching out. You'd be surprised how many people don't think to reach out. Of course, if you're thinking about the 1% people, right, the CEOs of big Fortune 500 companies, yes, people are reaching out to them all the time, making requests. But people beneath in smaller positions, working for smaller organizations, they're not getting these requests on a daily basis. So when they do see a request, they're honored, they're flattered, and more likely than not, they're very open to helping you.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned hiding behind technology. I think you're right that we're doing that because it's easier. But the other piece of it is a lot of times companies tell us, apply online. If you're a good fit, we'll call you. Like that's become the standard thing. And I've noticed even if a job seeker goes to say a really great career fair, which occasionally you get the opportunity to go to big one, and there are tons of, companies that have booths. And nowadays, in the past, you would go and there'd be HR people at these booths, and they would exchange business cards with you, and you'd give them your resume, and sometimes they would even interview you on site for a job. Like, it was like a whole thing. And nowadays, if you go to these big career fairs, I have noticed a lot of times the people at the booths do not bring business cards with them. They're not always interested to take your resume, and they will again tell you just to apply online. And I think it really trains us as job seekers to assume that that's true. And you mentioned a ton of jobs are not posted online. I would say even jobs that are posted online are not always filled from online. They're often filled through connections. And so taking that time to like really network and get to meet people, I mean, it sets you up so that you're someone that other people think of when they have a job. And so I would say not only don't hide behind technology, but don't believe the lie that you should just be applying online, because it's just not true.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, networking sounds like this daunting task. Like you have to go out there and ask people for a job. And that's really not what it's about. It's more so building relationships, making connections with people. And I like to call it speaking your passion and practicing that. Because when you speak your passion to someone that's new, that's in your field, you're really practicing your interview skills in a way. You're practicing sharing what it is that you care about, sharing your strengths, sharing your past experiences, and I call them intentional experiences. So anything that connects to what it is that you care about, right? So if you're like, oh, I wrote for College Magazine, and you can talk about what that experience was like, that's really great practice. All of that's networking, and all of that is helping you build a stronger relationship with this person. So just like you said, they're going to think of you when there's an opportunity or when their network presents an opportunity, because that's how people are finding out about positions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned, when people come to you, oftentimes they're lost or they feel stuck. And if we are lost and stuck, I mean, when we're sort of beginning this process and we're trying to figure out what our passion is, what our, career should look like, I mean, how do we go about identifying what that career might be? I mean, what sorts of things make different people happy or fulfilled or passionate in their new career?
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to explore what's out there and to try it. So I really encourage building up intentional experiences. So instead of, for example, going to your activities fair on your college campus and signing up for just everything, right? Maybe picking one or two things that really connect to what it is that you find most fulfilling. So let's say, you're passionate about animals, right? And and it doesn't mean that you're going to become a veterinarian, which is a very linear path, but that you care about animals and you want to do something in that space. Maybe you volunteer with an organization that helps your local humane society. And then now you have an experience where you can say, okay, here's what I liked from that experience. Here's maybe what I didn't like. Here's what I want to do in the future. Maybe I want to, where are you going to go next from that? There's so many ways to connect what it is that you love to a career, but you just have to start in some space initially, and then from there connect it again and really test it out. I don't know if does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the thing I really took away from what you were just saying, which I completely agree with, is that it's all about experience. Because, I talk with job seekers every day who are sort of like trying to work out this puzzle in their head. Like it's like a Rubik's Cube, like I've got to figure out the answer to the Rubik's Cube before I can apply for this perfect job. And it's like, it's really hard to make a good decision about what might make you happy if it's all in your head. Like, I often have had job seekers who I send out for sort of like these informational interview networking kind of meetings. And if they can, I suggest that they go to the business in person, like where the person works, so they can actually see the whole environment. And, people will come back from those meetings and sometimes they'll say, oh my God, that environment was horrible. I can't imagine like sitting in a cubicle all day. Like that just sounds like a nightmare, And it's like, if they hadn't gone to that business to look at it in person, they wouldn't know. And they could sit and think about it for ages and never quite come up with the right answer. But you go and within like an hour, you can tell really quickly if you would like something or not. And so it's sort of like getting out of your head and actually going and doing things.
That's why I encourage every, student or young professional to ask people, what does a day in your life look like when you're talking to someone in their career? Like, what does their day-to-day look like? Are they at a computer all day? Are they answering emails all day? Are they in meetings? Are they connecting with the community? Are they writing a lot? Understand what it is that they're actually doing, what the motions look like, and make sure that they align with the things that interest you.
Right. I mean, I think there are some people, for example, who really they love just sort of sitting at a desk and like pushing work out. Like it's fun for them. And there's other people who would hate that. And they may really love, going and having sales meetings with people all day and meeting with different people in different locations. And, maybe someone else would actually really hate that. So you're right. It's what does a day actually look like? Well, I'm curious, so we're talking about the things that might make us happy or might make us passionate. On the other side, when someone is starting this journey and they're feeling stuck and they're feeling kind of unhappy, do you find that there are some common themes that are really making those people unhappy at work? Like, what are some of the things that are going to push our buttons?
Yeah, I think that there's certain things that are probably happening at that work. Maybe you're given work that doesn't interest you. Maybe you're not interested in the company's mission to begin with. So you probably settled for that opportunity or didn't fully understand what that opportunity entailed. I know for me, I was a government consultant right out of college, and I was kind of sold this dream of what the position would be, that it would be very challenging and working with this cross-functional team and solving big problems. And as it was such a large company at starting out as a level 1 there, I really didn't get to do much of that. And so, right there, I would say a tip would be to apply for organizations that are smaller. Maybe companies that have under 50 people, for example, because you're going to get to do more. I think that a lot of young people don't feel that they get to flex their skills and talents, and that they're not getting to have as much responsibility. And that can be really uninspiring. So I think that's that's how sometimes people get stuck. A good way to get out of that is to request other work. You can create experiences for yourself within the kind of work that you're doing. I spoke to one of my graduates who was writing for a political paper, but he loves pop culture. And so he asked if he could have his own column, and he created so much value for them. Like, he made himself invaluable that they were like, yeah, of course. Like, we want you to stay, whatever we can do to make you enjoy your role more. So you'd be surprised sometimes when you ask, or when you can create other opportunities for yourself, how many people will say yes to that.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Like, that is really interesting. I think we're so often trained to sort of just do what we're told. And so the idea of starting to ask for extra stuff is not always something we even think about. The other issue I sometimes see when people are feeling stuck or burned out, if I really dig into it, is that they might be in a workplace that's really toxic with people that they just, either they really don't get along with, or there's just a lot of toxic stuff going on. Maybe they're working with someone that has a lot of anger. I've even worked with clients who maybe their boss is like throwing things at work and they feel uncomfortable. And I think in situations like that, someone may come to me and say, I need to switch to a totally new career. And when you start to dig into it and you kind of like peel back the layers, I guess you could say, of the issue, you realize that they actually love their work, but they're in a really unhealthy place. And I think if you're thinking of making a total pivot, it's really important that you are in tune with like what the issue is, because if you actually love your work, I actually had someone recently who wanted to totally switch careers, but when I would ask him about his work, he would just light up. He loved it, what he does. And I started digging into the organization that he had been at, and I realized the organization was really unhealthy. And he took it on as if like, well, clearly this isn't the right work for me. And he actually emailed me, I think it was like yesterday. He just hit his like 90-day mark at his new company, and he's doing the old work that he used to do, but at a healthy place. And he was so happy that he didn't switch. So I don't want to go down like a total rabbit hole, but I think it's really important to separate out if you're not inspired by the work or if it's an issue with your workplace.
Oh, totally. And it may just be, the organization that you're putting that type of work towards. Maybe
Mhm.
you don't align with their values or their mission. I recommend, especially if you're passionate about, your industry and your field, get involved with organizations. So like, let's say you're a developer, maybe there's a local developer meetup or a WordPress group that you could connect with. And that's how you can find about other opportunities. And you could flex your skill set working for an organization that aligns with what you care about.
Mhm. I actually really like that. So first of all, I personally am very driven by the mission of the organization. Like, and I very rarely find other people who kind of like bring this point up. For me, there's certain industries or types of organizations that I get really excited about, and other ones that I just could care less about. And I could do the same work at one and feel totally bored, and at the other feel completely excited. So I think you're right. And in terms of knowledge and knowing about the company, I think that I'm trying to think. I think Glassdoor put out some data that said one of the biggest challenges companies have is like new employees that were not well educated enough about their company. Because the more you can know about the company and the mission, the more likely you are to be happy once you actually start. So I think that's a really good point that you're making.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I do think the research part is big. And you can do that research while you're networking, right? So if you think a company seems cool and you're like, oh, this person worked for, Forbes, talk to them and ask them, what was that like? What was a day in your life like writing for them? And then also they had a career journey before that. So they worked at other publications. What was it like working for those publications? And you can get an idea. They can paint that picture for you. And you can understand like what those organizations' values were, what the company culture was like, and what the mission was.
hmm I think a really good example too of this understanding the work is the field of law. I don't know about you. I've met with tons of lawyers. I've never found a lawyer that is happy or that law was like that practicing law was what they thought it was going to be when they went through law school. Because they come out and it's just tons of paperwork and writing and a lot of like alone time. And it's not like the exciting debating in the courtroom that they were picturing.
It's not the Ally McBeal they thought.
Right. Yeah. And it's like they went through all that law school and paid a lot of money for that. And they came out and realized immediately that like this is the worst job that they could have possibly signed up for, sort of a thing. And it's like do a little bit of research. Like,
Yeah, I can't tell you when people are feeling stuck. A lot of times the question is, do I pivot? Do I look for another opportunity in my current field, or do I go back to school? Going back to school is oftentimes a question that weighs on them. I have that question for myself, and what I did was I reached out to past professors and said, what are your thoughts on the MBA program? Do you think that makes sense for me? For me, I was running College Magazine, which at the time was a startup, and I was trying to wonder if an MBA would make sense for me on my path. So, I say, take those same steps, talk to your past professors, and then talk to other people that have gone to law school, right? In this situation for lawyers, for example, and ask them what that journey looked like. Maybe someone 1 or 2 years out of law school so they can reflect on that past experience and they were kind of just in your shoes versus someone that's been a lawyer for many years and maybe has their own firm and is kind of like, yeah, it's great being at the top.
hmm well, yeah. And, people will be honest with you. They'll tell
Mhm.
you, I mean, what do you tell people when they ask you about graduate school? I mean, do you say, you tell them go do research, or do you have like a general sort of philosophy around whether or not to go back to school?
I think it's understanding what your goal is. What is your career vision? And if going to school is part of that vision, right? If what you want to do, if you know that you want to work at the university level, right? If you want to work in university administration and you know that going to grad school is part of that path, and that's what you're most passionate about doing, then yes, grad school makes sense. And you've talked to people that are in that field that are doing what you want to do. And that's the path they've taken. Then it makes sense. Sometimes it's more optional and it's not necessary. And then you can decide if that's for you or if it's not. I think that school is an amazing opportunity. I think any way that you can further your education, we should always be continual learners, and school's one of those ways to do that. I also think gaining experience is another way.
I totally agree. And I like the fact that you use the word optional. I think, so first of all, I completely agree. I think school is a great experience. It's a great way to further your education. But I talk to job seekers every single day who say, I've been having a tough time finding a job for the last month. Clearly, I need to get a different degree. This degree just isn't working for me. And I've seen people go through like a whole process of a new, even undergraduate degree, which it like boggles my mind. And they come out and they're applying for jobs that don't really require like a specific degree. And they have the same trouble getting a job the second time around as the first time. It's just now they have a lot more student debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say if you are going to go back to school, you want to really make sure that it's for the right reasons. It's because you truly want that education, you truly value it, or it's truly needed in the field that you're switching to. And anybody who's considering it, I would strongly suggest downloading what's called a post-graduation report. Most, universities or graduate programs put out a post-graduation report. It outlines where do most of their graduates work, what do they do, and how much do they make. So if you're investing in a really expensive program, but the graduates of that program make very little money, you want to know that on the front end.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about they're leaning on their degree to get them the job. Degrees don't get you a job. You get you a job. And your degree is the path that you took where you gained experience in a certain field and you gained skill sets. And now you need to tie all that together and connect that to intentional experiences, whether those be internships, side hustles, volunteering, part-time jobs, or your first job, and then build up that experience. So then now you have a story to tell that makes you the right candidate, the most passionate candidate, the best fit. It's not that because I have a political science degree, now I am the best fit for this opportunity to work at, Emily's List.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, sometimes I'm like, take that money that you would have taken for graduate school and invest it in your job search, like a tiny fraction of it, whether it's working with like a coach or taking a speaking class or working on your resume. I mean, you are going to have to do those things anyway. Be sure that you really do need that education. Don't assume that the education is the problem. And I think also realize that job seeking can take time. Like, geez, the further you are in your career, the longer it's going to take you to find a job. And just because you haven't found a job in 1 month or 2 months, it doesn't mean that you got to totally scrap everything and start over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's not a solo process, right? You're not in this alone. There's a network of people that surround you, and there are these people that are out there that that you need to be connecting with and leaning on and getting information from, and hoping that they'll connect you with other opportunities, and not even hoping, because they will. And through that process, it's a lot of talking. And so I love what you said about taking maybe a speech class or something, because throughout this whole process, you're telling your story. You have to speak to the experiences that you've had in a way that's compelling. So someone's like, oh, you led a team of 6 writers and you helped them become better writers by, pointing out their active versus passive voice issues and helping them, with show versus tell. And then, you've gotten to see the evolution of their writing, and you got to decide what got published and what was quality on the site. And then you got to see their articles get thousands of views. Like, if you're able to tell that story in that way, the person that's hiring you or the person that you're talking to and networking with, they're going to be like, wow, that's really impressive. Like, I can visually see what you did and where you're coming from and the kind of knowledge that you have. And so many of us really downplay a lot of our experiences, or we're kind of bored with our own story. So we don't do a very good job of telling our story. And so when you can't tell your story very well, people aren't going to be as interested, and people aren't going to be like as lit up and excited to want to connect you with opportunities. They're not like, they're not going to really, cheer for you, because they want to be able to see that fire in you and that experience and that excitement that you have, that passion, right? so that they can say, this is the person that you need to hire. Like, this person's going to take your company to the next level. Like, this is the person that's going to really grow in this position.
Mm-hmm. I really love what you just said about we're bored with our own story because that is so true. So often it's not only that we're not the best salespeople at telling our story, it's truly that we know it. And you're right, like we're over it.
Yeah, I mean, most people get sick of their job because you're in it every day. But if you tell your job to someone that's never heard of it before, they're going to be really curious about it. And you really have to pretend like it's your elevator pitch every time. You have to be entrepreneurial with your own career story, per se.
You're right. And it's super hard at times. But you're totally right. Well, so I'm curious. So say that we've kind of gone through this process and we've identified what we think is the new career for us, the thing that's going to make us passionate and happy, like when we go to work. What if this thing we've identified is in like a totally new part of business that we've never worked in? Like, then what?
Talk to people who have been there. So I'm actually going through that. I run College Magazine, and we have about 100 writers around the nation that I get to work with, but it's all virtual. And I took a pause moment for myself and said, what do I really love doing? Where do I light up inside? And for me, it's always been speaking with students. It's always been when I go into the classroom, or when I, judge an entrepreneurship contest, or, when I talk to journalism students. And I used to just talk about College Magazine and the entrepreneurial experience. But what I really love is being able to connect all of my career coaching and working with students with my speaking. And that was a new space for me because, like I said, I'm a publisher. I create marketing campaigns for advertisers. That's what a publisher does. I'm not necessarily getting to speak with students and audiences like that and getting to see them light up and the energy in the room and what that's like. And I knew that was what I wanted. So when I made that shift, that pivot, I spoke to other people that did the exact same thing, that they do campus tours and they spread their message, and they shared, like, I have a podcast, I have a book, this is the path that I took, these are the guests that I lined up on my podcast, this is how I first got started. And then I could see the roadmap for myself and understand better of what this was going to look like and how to make those connections. And anytime I have a question, I know I can go back to those people, and they become part of your network, and also they become your mentors.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that, again, you're focusing on the network and building the network instead of like scrapping everything and getting a new degree. I really like that. Well, so say we're going to go through this process and we're going to transition into this new career. Help us to kind of set some expectations around timing. Like, is it going to be a quick process? How long should we expect this to take?
Oh my gosh, wouldn't we all love it if we could just snap our fingers and just pivot and just be like uber successful in that new field overnight, right? Because with the way that social media works, like, we see those people all the time and we feel like they're overnight successes, right? You see the YouTubers with hundreds and thousands of subscribers. But I mean, I dare you to go back to that YouTuber's very first video. I promise you it was 5 years ago. I promise you that it was really, low budget with like the worst lighting. And, they didn't know what they were doing. So it's going to be a long journey. That's the thing. There really isn't, it's not like you set a career vision and there's this end goal and you're like, check, I got there.
Right.
It is a journey. And oftentimes that end goal is going to move around. And when you achieve what you wanted to achieve, right? I wanted to make a national magazine. It's a national magazine. It's like, now what? Right? So you're going to constantly be growing and changing and evolving through this journey. So it's there is no timeline per se, in terms of like the timeline for the next opportunity that you'll get. That's up to you, because the next opportunity can be tomorrow. You can volunteer tomorrow. You can attend a meetup tomorrow. You can start reaching out to one person a day, starting today, in the field that you want to be part of, and start learning from them, right? Because you could get all the books in the world about, for example, like I said, I wanted to be speaking on campuses. I could get all the books I wanted. I could sign up for all the courses I wanted on speaking. But to me, I really appreciate the value of speaking to someone that's been there, who's been in those shoes and what they did. I think that's the best, right? If you want to learn how to run a magazine, come right to me and I'd be happy to, take you on the fast track and show you like, these are the areas where I've learned lessons and this is what it was like. If you're going to start a podcast, if you talk to Angela, she's going to let you know, she's going to save you time by being like, this is the mic that you go with, this is the way you edit the podcast, because she's been there and she's been on that journey. And I think that nothing is more valuable than that firsthand experience. And maybe that goes back to my journalism roots of primary sources, right? You gotta interview your sources. The expertise there is just invaluable.
I totally agree. I also think it's almost like a process of like rebranding. Like you said, like going to a meetup, volunteering, like you're kind of like taking baby steps in the direction of the new thing to get people to start to believe that you could really do it. And this is really who you are and what you want.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You have to start imagining it. Exactly. And start saying it for the first couple of times. And sometimes you start off with, you're like, I will do this, right? Like I will be a graphic designer instead of saying I am a graphic designer, because now I've done this little side hustle for my friend's startup. And I designed this banner that she now has on her website.
Right. Well, when you talk to people that are going through this process, I mean, what sorts of feelings are they going through? I mean, is it as easy as we're talking about?
It's not easy because it's terrifying, really, to hit the send button on a LinkedIn message, as silly as that seems. Because we're worried that someone's not going to receive this well, when in reality, they will.
Mm-hmm. I think it also kind of goes back, you mentioned early in our conversation that sometimes we've taken a career that our parents suggested for us. And my guess is that if our parents suggested a career to us, it's probably a career they know a little bit about.
You'd think.
Yeah, right? Like you'd hope so. Like maybe it's something that they do or something they heard about or whatever. Sometimes when you're switching to something that like your family and friends don't know a lot about, sometimes they can be kind of negative. And I think that can make the feelings of like anxiety and fear like go up because our family, loved one support system may not always get it. I'm curious. It sounds like the main support system we should be looking for in this case would be people who've done this before, meetup groups, things like that. Is that kind of the direction you're thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that our parents, they want us to have security and they want to protect us. And so oftentimes they're going to mention, career routes that they're familiar with or career routes that they believe will lead to stability, that will be lucrative. So they'll say, get the business degree. My parents said the same thing. I was an English major and I also initially double majored in business because of that pressure. And then I ended up finding a program called the Quest program. It was this really dorky entrepreneurial program, stood for Quality Enhancement Systems and Teams, and it was within the business school. And I ended up leaving the business major, but I stayed with that program because I'd already gotten into it. And that was something where I got to I just remember being really drawn into this program because it was like the first class was you could create your own product. Mm-hmm. I mean, that should have been a really big signal to me that I was very entrepreneurial at that. I mean, I'd always been that way, but that's why I wanted to join this course. And that's how I ended up becoming a consultant out of college. But my point there is that actually ended up, I did take their advice. I did follow that route that they requested of me. And I didn't totally see it through in the sense that they had hoped for me. I think that we need to let go of that pressure from parents or from peers and their expectations and really pause and look within, right? So for me, it was that spark that led me to that other program. The idea of oh my God, I get to create my own product. That was really cool. And we made a top bunk bed storage system that first class. I just thought that was so fun because I was living on the top bunk bed and I'm I have nowhere to put my books or, my phone or anything. So I just thought that was really neat. So you've got to follow what it is that you love and then find your cheerleaders. So find other people that are like that. And so out of college, I lived in DC. I connected with other people that were entrepreneurial because I was starting my magazine. And I would go to, local tech events or local entrepreneurial events. I connected with the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship on my campus. So look to your campus for those resources. and start building that community there, because they're going to get it. They're going to know what your path looks like, and they're going to be rooting for you.
I totally agree. I'll tell you, you mentioned family pressure from your family. In my situation, a lot of people in my family are musicians. And had I gone the route that probably they would have preferred, I would have been like a singer or something.
That sounds exciting. If you're passionate about singing, though.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll tell you, I grew up in Oklahoma, and I grew up pretty poor because of the people in my family who are musicians. So it's a real nice hobby, but for me, it was not like a money-making kind of stable thing, which is something I value. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going the route of computer engineering, which I didn't have a lot of internal support on that. But I was able to, like you said, reach out to other people who understood why I would do that, what that meant, what you need to do to make this kind of work. And it ended up being a really good choice for me. But I had to really not follow that template that was kind of like laid out there, because it wasn't my template, and I think you have to be willing to sort of listen to yourself when things don't feel right.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's part of why I love the college experience. Like, probably why I'm so passionate about College Magazine, why I want to start it, is because when you go to college, it's that first time that you're really away from your parents and family, where you could start to form your own opinions and really become the individual that you are. And I think when you can start to have your own goals like that and not feel that pressure, that's really exciting. And I love getting to be part of these students' lives who are going through that too, and really identifying for themselves the things that they want, the things that they value, and what they care about, and the impact they want to make in the world.
Absolutely. So I have also a random question. I met with a college student earlier this week, and this person is studying, I won't get super specific, but they're studying computers, which they're really passionate about computers. They love computers. But now that they're in college, they realize they're a little bit behind in the math area of school. And maybe it came from going to a high school that didn't prepare them as well or whatever. And so they're going through this process of totally reevaluating what should they do with their life, and considering scrapping the whole computer thing and looking at something totally different. And I'll be honest, I feel a little on the fence about that, because I think the person
Mhm.
still really loves computers. And I'm not sure if just one road bump or one speed bump should be the thing that causes you to totally switch. But I don't know. You work with a lot of college students. What would you say to someone that's in this situation?
Yeah, I think that works for any industry. I love that you brought that up, because it's just because you didn't get the lead in the play doesn't mean you can't be passionate about theater and have a career that has to do with theater. Right? Not everyone's going to be the 1%, the best, the top of their game in that industry, but there's enough opportunity and there's enough space for all of us to be doing that, right? There's not just one talk show host out there. There's not just Oprah, right? There's Ellen too. There's all these other people that are in these positions at the top. So, and beneath the top, right? And beneath that. And so just because they're not the most advanced at computers doesn't mean there's not a position for them within that realm, right? Or that they couldn't work at it and grow in that position. So, I give the example of theater, right? So maybe you're not meant for the stage, but maybe you're meant for the design team or the marketing team, or maybe you work for an organization that sells last minute Broadway tickets, right? I interviewed someone on my podcast that's the VP of marketing for Today Tix. And so she gets to be very involved with theater on a daily basis. And that was her passion, was the arts.
I totally agree. I mean, the thing is, so my perspective was that I'm still mulling it over before I totally, give a really strong opinion directly to the person. But so this is the thing, math can be learned, right? And just because we're behind because of high school, there's options like tutors that are out there. Math doesn't have to come to you naturally. I think sometimes just because we're the one that had to put extra effort in doesn't mean we're not going to come out being one of the best at something. Sometimes when things are harder, you might even end up being the best because you get all the little details behind it. You didn't just show up good like on the first day. But with this person, the thing that really drives them is computers. So I think the math portion is just one piece of like a big puzzle. And given that this person is a student, I feel like if they came away from college with a really solid degree in computers, their career might start off in a way that's a little easier. Like it's going to open doors because it's a really special degree to have. Versus, I think if they go down an easy route, like let's say they switch to like photography or something, which is also great. But I think when it comes time to get a job and like make money, that's going to be a struggle too, because that's not the most lucrative career. So I think at some point you're going to have to struggle. And so it's like you can either struggle to learn the math now, or you can struggle later when you have a degree that was easier to get but doesn't qualify you for the same level of jobs. Like I think struggle is going to happen, and I don't think it should be the thing that tells you not to move forward. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there's so many ways to look at that one, right? I mean, are you talking about computer engineering, by the way, when you say computers?
Computer science. Computer science.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So if they're like, oh my God, I'm failing all my computer science courses, like I don't want to end up with like a, 2.3 GPA because I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to get a job. That's a legitimate fear, right? I totally agree. Go the route of tutors, see what you can do. If that's what you're passionate about. I think that, I think it is harder to go with the easy degree initially and then do something that you don't love for the rest of your life than to put the work in up front around what you love and be able to have a career that connects to your passion.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. I say put in the hard work. But if they're super worried about that GPA, which is a silly thing at the end of the day, and like you said, there's solutions. They can learn it. They can get all the tutors. I remember I took a stats class that was accounting class. And I had 2 tutors for this course.
Right.
Because it was, the only course that I was really struggling in. And I'm just like, I need to get this.
Right.
And one tutor could only meet once a week. The other one could only meet once a week. So I met with 2 different tutors and I figured it out and I did it. And I got through it. And that's how I got into the business school was, really just kind of sticking with it, and not giving up. But yeah, I think that it's even, so if you do decide that, you want your GPA to be at a certain level and you want to go with an easier route that's going to reflect, allow you to achieve that, still find some way to connect with your passion though. And if even if it's not in your degree, can you find an organization on your campus about, computer science? Could you start building your own program? Could you intern for a computer science company? And maybe you don't work in computer science, like you're not coding, but you're on, the communications team for that, or you're part of that process of product development.
I totally agree. I mean, well, anyway, I think I could ask you these questions all day. Amanda, this has been really helpful. Where can we go to learn more about you and about your work?
Yeah. So I would say check out Find Your Passion Career, findyourpassioncareer.com. And you can check out my podcast, which is also Find Your Passion Career. And when you do go to my site, there's an opportunity to download the 5 steps that will unlock your passion. I think these steps are so important. It just walks you through the questions that you want to ask yourself to get to the core of what it is that you are passionate about. I don't think passion is a scary word. It's really just, I say the equation is when your interests, strengths, and values come together to what you like or possibly love. And I do think it's important to set aside that time to reflect and figure out what it is that you're passionate about.
Excellent. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I'm so glad I got to speak with you, Angela.
And thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode today, please don't forget to help me out. Go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show. The more subscribers we have, the easier it is for other people to find the show.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.